Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be a DIY all the time arm knitting blanket. Just a heads up though, I will be making a throw blanket instead of a very large blanket. Alright, so let's get started. I will be using the Loops and Threads Chunky Grande yarn and in the color neutral. The thickness of the yarn is a 7 jumbo. And for those of you who do have questions about maybe possibly washing the blanket, on the wrapper just a hand wash and dry flat. Now the easiest way I found to detangle the yarn was just to pull the loose end that is stuck in the center of the yarn and just detangle the ball of yarn. Alright, and we'll be using the long tail cast on method. So to do so, you're first going to make a tail, then a slip knot. And the tail should be about 5 feet, so I'm just using the measurement of my forearm just to make the 5-foot measurement. Okay, so once you have those 5 feet, you're going to then make your slip knot. And to do so, what you're going to do is pinch the tail, the one I'm pulling here, and then the working yarn, which is going to be the one that will be attached to the yarn for the rest of the process. You want to pinch those two yarn strings together. You're just going to turn it away from you, and after you turn it away from you, you're just going to pull at the working yarn, and then it'll create the knot. And once you have that knot going, you're just going to pull it tight to secure it. Once you have secured your knot, you're just going to insert it into your hand and tighten it down. Alright, once you have created that slip knot, you do want to just extend it to the top of your forearm because you will be adding an additional 14 stitches onto your arm. So this is the most difficult part of the entire process, which is when we're going to begin to cast on some stitches. So what you're going to do is grab your left hand, and with your index finger and your middle finger, you're going to clamp onto that tail, which is the free hanging yarn, and then you want to turn your hand around so that your palm is facing you. Then with your ring finger and your pinky, you're going to grab both the tail and you're going to grab onto that working yarn as well. So then afterwards, you're going to turn your hand back around. You're going to wrap your thumb around that working yarn and then pull your right hand down. To create these two loops that you see here, kind of like this little heart. And then once you have created those two loops, what you're going to do is under that first ring, your hand is going to go under that first one, over the middle, and then over and under that last one. Again, you're going to go under the middle, over the middle string, and over and under. So here I'm going to actually do it. So again, you're going to go under the first string, over the middle, and over and under the following string. And then it'll automatically create that stitch on your arm. And then as soon as you do have that stitch, you just want to make sure that you do tighten the knot, just so that the tighter each stitch, the smaller the holes in your blanket. So again, you're going to clamp on to that tail, turn your hand around. Then with your ring finger and your pinky, you're going to grab that working yarn and that tail. Next, you're just going to turn your hand back around and wrap your thumb around the working yarn. You're going to bring your right arm down to create the two loops. You're going to bring your hand under the first yarn, over the second one, and then over and under the third one. So again, let me go ahead and show you. Maybe this might work a little bit better. You're going to go under the first yarn that's closest to you, over the middle, and then over and under that last yarn. It'll automatically create a stitch on your arm. Okay, I know that kind of sounded a little confusing and probably a little hard to follow as well, even with the video, but I promise you the more you try it and once you become hands-on actually doing with the yarn, it actually becomes a lot easier and you can skip some of these steps as you go along. So one last time, just to make sure we have it locked down, you're going to take that yarn, make sure you do keep tightening those stitches, and with your index finger and your middle finger, you're going to clamp on to that tail, turn your hand around so that your palm faces you, and you're going to clamp on to both the working yarn and the tail. You're going to turn your hand back around and wrap your thumb around that working tail. Bring your right hand down to create the two loops. And then lastly, you're going to go under that first yarn, over the middle, and over and under that third piece of yarn. So again, under the first one, over the middle, and then over and under that last yarn, and it'll automatically create your stitch. And then just go ahead and make sure you tighten it as much as you can, but leaving enough room that you can keep moving it up to your forearm for all of the other stitches. Okay, and then here I did take the liberty of just fast forwarding it because it's kind of the same steps over and over again. Okay, so here I have my 15 stitches, and now we're going to actually start arm knitting. So you no longer need the tail, and in order to start knitting, what you're going to do is move those stitches from your right hand to the left hand. So since you no longer need the tail, you'll be only using that working yarn, and what you're going to do is grab the working yarn. You're going to take that first stitch and pull it over your hand, so you create these 2 loops you see here. Then you're going to turn that working yarn to face yourself, and then you're just going to pull your left hand right through that first loop. And then again, as always, you want to make sure you tighten each stitch just so you have the same amount of consistency throughout each stitch. Okay, so again, you're going to grab that working yarn. Then you're going to pull over that next stitch. And once you pull over the stitch, you have created the 2 loops, and once you've done so, just turn that working yarn towards yourself and then run your left hand right through it. And then again, don't forget to tighten each stitch as you continue. Alright, so one last time. You're going to grab that working yarn, pull the stitch over your hand, turn the working yarn towards yourself, and then run your left hand right through it, and then tighten the stitch. Okay, so like I did before, I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward through all these stitches just because it does get kind of repetitive doing the same steps over and over again. Okay, so once you get to that last stitch that you are starting to knit, you're just going to continue the same process as you did before. Just pull the yarn over the working yarn and pull your arm through. And then you've just transferred all of your stitches from your right hand to your left hand, and now you see that you are beginning to make the blanket pattern. Now we're going to be moving the stitches from the left hand to the right hand, and to do so you're going to do basically the same thing, just kind of vice versa, where you're going to hold the working yarn on your left hand now, and then you pull that stitch over your hand, turn the working yarn towards yourself, and now you'll just be running your right hand through it. And again, don't forget to tighten those stitches. Like I said, it's pretty much the same thing you've been doing, it's just on the opposite hand now. So you're going to grab the working yarn, pull it over your hand, turn it towards yourself, and then run your right hand through it. Alright, so this is pretty much what I have completed with one ball of yarn. Now the next step is just showing you what to do if you run out of yarn. So I'm using 4 balls of yarn to be exact, and so once I ran out of the first one, what you want to do is grab the end of your first ball of yarn and grab the beginning of your second ball of yarn. And all you're gonna do is double knot it. Just kind of like when you tie your shoe, that first little knot you make, you're gonna just make 2 of those and just tighten it as much as you can, pulling the ends back and forth in each direction just to make sure that you have a really nice tight and tug knot. And once you have that knot, you can continue as you've been doing. Okay, so I didn't want to bore you with all the back and forth because it's kind of the same thing over and over again, alternating right to left. And this is pretty much what I got from my 4 balls of yarn. Like I said, it's just going to be a small little throw blanket. So it was about 2 feet by 5 feet to be exact when I finished the blanket. So once you have that done and you have finished all your balls of yarn, you're just going to go ahead and bind off. Okay, and in order to bind off the blanket, what you're going to do is just make 2 stitches as you have been doing before onto your opposite hand. And now the only difference is you're only going to make 2 stitches on the opposite hand, and the first stitch you made, you're just going to pull over the second one. And what you want to make sure you don't do here is you don't want to make these stitches too tight as you've been doing before, because if you make them too tight, the end of your blanket is going to be shorter than the top of the blanket. So again, you're gonna make 1 more stitch, making 2 stitches on one hand, and then pull that first stitch over your hand to create that bind off. So once you have that 1 stitch, you're just gonna make 1 more, and then pull that last stitch over the previous one. I hope this makes sense. I'm pretty sure it's easier to follow through the video. So it's gonna be the same pattern the entire time, just 2 stitches on that one hand, always moving the one closest to you over the other. So again, I'm making 1 more stitch to make 2 stitches on that opposite hand and moving the one closest to me and pulling it over the other. Okay, and this is where I kind of overcompensated, or I guess you could say undercompensated. I thought I had a lot more yarn than I did, and I was just 1 stitch away, so I was so close, but no matter, I just took a little bit of the excess yarn I had on my tail and just tied it on to the end of my working yarn. So if you have that problem, don't worry about it, just do what I did. Just take the excess yarn from your tail and just tie it onto that working yarn, and then you should be good to go. Okay, so here I'm just transferring my last stitch onto my opposite hand, and you're gonna pull it over as you've been doing before. Now for this last stitch, you can see here, what you want to do here is that if you have a lot of yarn left on your working yarn, this is where you would cut off all the excess. But like I said, since I kind of undercompensated, I had a short piece. So once you have your working yarn already cut, you're gonna pull it through that last loop there, which is gonna then create a knot. And once you have that knot, you're just gonna pull it as tight as you can just to make sure that it is nice, tight, and tug, and it won't detangle after you completed your blanket. And here we have our blanket. It's almost done though. We do have a few more steps just to go. Okay, so the last few steps is what you first want to do is grab those little loose ends that you've created when you tied the 2 balls of yarn together. What you want to do first is tighten the knot again just to make sure you do secure it in place and it won't detangle. And then you're just going to cut off the ends as close as you can to the knots. And you're going to continue that same process through each one that you created. And lastly, the 2 tails that you have left, you're just going to weave them in and out of your blanket just to kind of camouflage them into the blanket. And then lastly, what I like to do is go back and kind of tug at the blanket itself, just because since my stitches were really tight, I just kind of wanted to go back and loosen them a little bit. This isn't going to make the holes any bigger or anything. I just kind of wanted to tug at them just to separate them just a little bit. And there you have your blanket! Doesn't it just look so fluffy and soft? Alright, well thank you for watching everybody, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I really loved the way it came out, and please subscribe.